Welcome to this full council meeting. I'll just open with kara kia, iti whānau o te kaunihera o te aoreiri, whia te mauramatanga kia marama, kia whai taki, kia whai mahi katoa, tu mai, tu kaha, aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou katoa, tihei, mauri ora. Apologies, I think we are actually all in attendance either by Zoom or in person, so no apologies. Public forum, so we have two people registered to speak in public forum. We have Councillor David Ogilvie on the catchment management plan for Motueka and Kevin Strickland speaking in relation to Best Island. So David, I'll start with you. So you know the drill, David, 5 minutes. I'll give you a nod at 4.5, should you still be speaking.
Morning, everybody. And the question is, why am I here and not over there? My stormwater concerns for Motueka indicated a bias, what the Auditor General would call a non-financial conflict of interest. I therefore withdrew from the hearings panel, hurriedly prepared a submission, of which a copy is in your agenda. Today I'm asking you, as Mayor and Councillors of Motueka, not to approve any of the views or items on page 10 of your agenda. The draft resolution for the Motueka Stormwater Plan. First and importantly, the so-called management plan is not a plan. It is not a plan to manage the stormwater needs of Motueka over the next 30 years to 2052. The title states it is a story map. It has limited relevance to any stormwater management. It is 45% history, 45% geography, about 10% stormwater. It fails to provide details of our network, of our system, of a complex network of pipes and drains and gates leading to Tasman Bay. Nor does this plan provide any programs, any timelines, any projects or funding aspects to improve the network over these next 30 years. It recommends a policy only of minimal management to address occasional nuisance matters. There is no practical or forward-looking thinking. For Motueka, it is hugely negative. I refer you to page 10, item 4 of the agenda. Page 10. The plan actually deviates and contradicts a major council policy. That is the 2019 Urban Stormwater Strategy. The plan also deviates from another major plan, the Nelson Tasman Land Development Manual. It sets out stormwater levels of service similar to the urban strategy I've just mentioned. Then item 5, also on page 10, states there are no cost-effective solutions available for Motueka. This is nonsense. With upgraded pipes, they were installed in the 60s and 70s. With improved technology, pumping stations, electronic gates, there are practical solutions available. Look around New Zealand, look, South Dunedin, Levin, Gisborne, Foxton, even Nelson City. There are solutions. Motueka is not exceptional with its stormwater needs. And a second aspect about the whole thing is the story map itself. The failure of the council to consult widely or even adequately. The public was advised to read the story map as a digital interactive production. For most, this was difficult if not impossible. Even those who were computer savvy, committee board members in Motueka, the Grey Power members expressed considerable confusion in their submissions. Just read those in your agenda. I actually arranged for printed copies to be made available. They arrived only 2 weeks before submissions closed, almost too late. Another factor was that there were no public presentations other than 2 webinars attended by 2 or 3 people. There were no public meetings, no drop-in sessions, such as would happen in the Moraga Sunday Market or the service in the meeting room or our Memorial Hall. There was consultation with Ngāti Rorua and Te Atiawa, but there are no records of those meetings. Another Mana Whenua iwi, Ngāti Tama, was not consulted, nor was the Wakatūan Corporation, nor was NRATE, nor the Te Whenua Marae Trust. And I find this most surprising and remarkable. And moreover, those residents who actually live alongside the major drains, those directly affected, they weren't consulted either. The Lummis drain, the Thorpe drain, the Woodlands drain, those residents alongside, probably 100 of them, not consulted. This reflects very badly on the council, and I doubt it meets the requirements of the appropriate legislation. So, Mr. Mayor and councillors, for these and other reasons, I'm asking you to not adopt or approve the proposed management plan on your agenda. Instead, ask the management to spend the next 12 months to prepare a stormwater management plan for Motueka, which addresses the issues, recommends achievable solutions over 30 years, and therefore will provide a high level of service deserving of your town. Motueka is the largest town in our district. It expects a stormwater management plan relevant to its needs over the next 30 years. The current draft, the story map, it fails miserably. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, David. Kevin.
Good morning, councillors.
Kevin, so same thing, 5 minutes. I'll give you a nod at 4:30 if you're still
Out of here in
no,
two.
all good.
So I've come just to talk about one topic only regarding what you'll be discussing regarding the Best Island access, and that is safety. There is 12, I counted 12 children under the age who are at primary school, younger, or at intermediates living on the island. And one day there's 8 blind corners, and one day one of those children will end up underneath a car. And how do I know that? Because it nearly happened to me. I had managed to come to a stop on one of these blind corners when I spotted this bicycle wheel coming round. The bike hit my car. The people who live on the island, we know about these corners. We do go slow, but there's lots of other people coming on the island, tradespeople who just don't realise how dangerous these corners are. I don't want to get into anything else with you, but I just wanted to raise that with you, that there will be a serious accident sooner rather than later on that road. The bus no longer comes onto the reserve to pick up the school children, the 2 buses, because the bus company deems the road dangerous. And now they have to go down a kilometre down the road to close to the bridge to catch the buses. That's all I want to raise with you. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Kevin. Thanks for coming in. So I know there's a number of other people from Best Island who are here to observe the discussion, and we'll take that item first on the agenda as well, so that you don't have to hang around here for the next few hours listening to a whole lot of things you might not be quite so interested in, despite the fact they are probably very interesting. Right, back to the agenda. So with that, Councillor Mailing, I see you're online, so welcome. We will move to the Best Island Road Legalisation Report. Oh, sorry, the declaration, any declarations of interest and anything in relation to today's meeting. Yeah, I think related to Motueka Catchment Management. Yeah, we'll make sure that's noted. Thank you, David. Right, Richard Kirby, I believe this is in your name, and Joe, if you'd like to come forward as well. Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Take the report as read and open for questions.
Okay, thank you. Right. Reports in front of people. It's been circulated. Presume it's been read. Are there firstly any questions before I look to any form of resolution? Councillor McNamara and then Councillor Greening.
Thank you. So we've undertaken consultation and discussion and everything with the landowners down there. Have we reached a consensus of how they would like to proceed?
The consensus is basically outlined in the report. There wasn't consensus for any of the options. There was a lot of support for the council purchasing the land and doing the fencing work outright. A lot of the community felt that the council set a precedent for itself, number one, in allowing the subdivision to occur back in the 50s and relying on access from the estuary without a legal road. And then in 2007, in extending Barnett Ave, council purchased that land and did not require landowners to contribute towards it. So their feeling is that this is just an extension from that, and that's why the majority of them request the council actually purchase the property. So that's in the recommendation.
Thank you, Richard. Anything further, Councillor McNamara? Councillor Greening and then Councillor Mailing.
Yeah, just a question, and you've kind of raised it already, Richard. The question of precedent and the community considering that there is a precedent here. Having read earlier reports, I got the impression that staff didn't agree with that position. Perhaps you could clarify that.
I mean, I can't comment on staff recommendations back in 2007. If I was there at the time, I probably wouldn't have recommended that. But nevertheless, it was recommended, and the council did accept it and purchase the land. So I'm just acting on that, and so the recommendation I have in front of you is one that's probably going to be more acceptable to the community than any other. The other option that's in front of you is to withdraw completely and leave the status quo. And I think given the history of what's happening out there with the central landowner and the 30 landowners, there's an opportunity now for the council to resolve it once and for all.
So are you stating that you no longer agree with the position that was advanced while Lindsay was here?
The decision in 2007 was prior to Lindsay, so I'm not sure what you're meaning about when Lindsay was here.
There was a report written around the time that Lindsay was here. I don't know if you were the author, you may have been, where there was a response to the concern about precedent. And in that report, which I think was 2016, maybe, I think it's attached to the earlier documents if you drill back through them. Council was suggesting that there was no precedent value here and that the community that precedent was misconceived. So I was just wondering if you still hold by that position or whether it's now changed.
Oh, well, that may be in the decision in 2016. That was before my time. And the decision in 2007 may have been incorrect. And as I said, if I'd been there at the time, I probably wouldn't have recommended that. But nevertheless, this decision was made, and the council did make that decision. And so my recommendation today is to keep in line with that decision and to resolve a very difficult situation at West Island.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mailing.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and it's good afternoon from Canada and good morning to you. Richard and Joe, I noted in the report that there were 18 of the 30 residents have confirmed support, and it appears to me from what I read that they are supporting mainly option 2, which I think is the lowest cost and leaves the road at a lower level. Would that be a fair comment?
Is option 2, all it does is actually legalise the road, construct a fence, obviously purchase the land for the road, construct the fence and leave it as it is. And the owners have indicated that they will be able to upgrade it or operate and maintain it. It's not unusual for council to have legal road that's used like this. We do have roads in the back country that we have signs on saying this road is not maintained by the council. So this wouldn't be a new situation. It has happened, or it does happen elsewhere in the district.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mailing. I've got Councillor Bryant, Councillor Mackenzie, Councillor Hill.
And Tufnell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, Richard, firstly, I have a question just around, we've well transversed the possibility of a targeted rate over all property officers. This might be a question from Mike, I'm just thinking. And we're not able to do that at this time now, are we?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. To put a targeted rate on, you would need to include that in our revenue and financing policy. You would need to consult on that. And so the next opportunity to consider or to place a targeted rate would be as part of the 2023-24 annual plan. You would consult in the lead up to the annual plan. In the past, staff advised that a targeted rate was not necessarily a suitable mechanism because of the high administration costs over a relatively small number of properties.
Thank you. So I think that leads us, because this issue's been around for a long time. Councillor Greening was talking about 2015 when former Chief Executive Lindsay Mackenzie was here, and I was quite involved at that time, and unfortunately we didn't get it across the line. So I'd like to see us do something positive this time to start the road to making this better for everyone down there. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I'm happy to move option 2, that we comprise a construction of a 9-metre legal road with no road upgrade and not maintained by the council for now, and funding including the council's purchase as it goes on.
I'd be happy to second, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Mailing. So it's been moved and seconded. So option 2 contained in the range of options within the resolution. So that is now the motion. So I've got Councillor Hill, Councillor Tufnell, Councillor Mackenzie, Councillor Hill, Councillor Tufnell. Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you very much, through the chair. So under option 2, can I just be clear? So Kevin's been here this morning talking about safety issues. So I've got a couple of questions. So the first one is, under option 2, will that address the safety issue?
I understand it might, because a 9-metre wide road width at the moment, I think the track has a lot of foliage in that around. To do a 9-metre road width, they would probably need some sight distance tidied up as well. So it could remedy that, yes.
Thank you. I've just got 2 other quick questions. So I'm assuming that, well, no, firstly, does this set any precedent in terms of a future liability for the council in terms of upgrading the road? So are we setting a precedent?
No, as I commented before, we do have a couple of roads in the district now that are utilised up the Wairea Valley. We have signage on it that we don't maintain it. So I think our obligations are to ensure it is safe, and we would go in and probably take away any safety issues, but certainly not maintain it to a standard that we maintain other roads to.
Okay, I guess that's sort of like a question mark. I mean, what denotes safety? But and then I guess my third question is, so that should the residents choose in the future to fund an upgrade, then that could be a targeted rate if we had the policy settings in place.
Mr. Mayor, can I just comment further on the targeted rate? One of the things about a targeted rate, we understand from a case in Auckland, is that if you go down the targeted rate for specific residents, the council or council staff have to be approved under the banking requirements. Mike probably forgot to mention this to you, because the legal people believe that a targeted rate for a fixed number of people for a specific benefit to them, it's like giving them a mortgage, and we basically got to have approval under the Finance Act to be able to get mortgages in that form. So perhaps Mike can explain it better than me.
Mike.
Through Mr. Mayor, my colleague is correct. A straight targeted rate is, as I previously advised councillors, if the targeted rate is in relation to what's effectively a loan, then you run into quite a significant number of rules and regulations you need to comply with because you're actually lending, and therefore all the consumer lending rules come in terms of disclosures, which once again makes it both difficult and possibly not possible. We'd have to look at the specific details at the time. But as I have suggested to councillors in the past, that's probably not a path you'd want to go down.
Thanks, Mike. Councillor Hill.
Through you, Chair, thank you. Thank you for the report. In terms of the point 7 of option 2, instruct staff to approach the central landowner seeking to amend the sale and purchase with a reduced road with a reduced compensation. Have there been some early discussions about that being remotely possible for them? I'm assuming there have been.
Yeah, the sale and purchase agreement was on the basis of a 12-metre wide, fully constructed road. And so they've agreed to that. There are conditions with it in terms of the consent process we have to go to because we cut across a reserve and we have to truncate a piece of reserve and amalgamate it with their property. We have had verbal requests, verbal discussions with them to say, listen, if we drop it down to 9 metres, can we revisit the valuation and alter the sale and purchase agreement? If they've acknowledged, yes, they're happy to have that discussion. Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Councillor Tufnell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm happy to support the motion, particularly in our position as a Richmond Ward councillor. We have had some discussion with some of the councillors in the ward, and basically we're pleased to see some progress being made to get this some movement so that we can get some reality for that and make it possible for the people on the island even to do a little bit more work on this themselves if they so desire. But this is a good starting point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Tufnell. Councillor Greening.
Just a question of clarification on the value put in option 2. That seems to be consistent with all the other options that are generating a more complete road. When I looked at the earlier reports, the funding given to fencing and legalisation was circa 25,000 each, which would be circa 50,000. So I'm just wondering why it's now jumped to 370.
When you say jump to 370, 370 includes the purchase of the land and the fencing and the legalising costs.
So those estimates before, I thought they were around 120, or was that?
No, the land purchase valuation has been in place now for over 18 months, and that's included in the 370,000. So I'm not sure 120 is probably specifically focused on other development aspects like constructing the road and maybe the fencing. But this 370 doesn't involve constructing any road at all. It's just legalisation, the costs with legalisation and installing a fence.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Greening. Councillor McNamara.
One of my questions has been answered, but the other one is the 70% of contributions coming out of the Richmond Ward Roading Development Fund. What impact does that have in terms of already programmed works and developments that are congested now?
I understand there are sufficient funds within the roading development contributions to not only do with this, but to do other projects that we have in place. And there's funds coming in all the time with the development going on in Richmond West.
There's also considerable congestion issues that we keep hearing about around Richmond that presumably those funds from those developments are supposed to address.
You probably have to talk to our Dwayne Fletcher on that aspect and what's been included. I know in the LTP there are significant investment in the which aligns with NZTA within Lower Queen Street. And from my recollection, that's been included in the development contribution calculations. So with this expenditure on this, which was unforeseen when those were done, the DCs will be revisited at the next LTP in the next 18 months and reassessed according to the work that's still outstanding.
Thank you. Councillor Greening, do you have another question?
I do. I forgot to ask it at the first time round. You have to apologise. I'm a little bit sick at the moment, so please bear with me. I just wanted to clarify, because I know a lot of residents, at least reading that report, were concerned about the public access. And it's interesting hearing the submission this morning that there is still a concern that people who aren't familiar with this road may start now using it because it becomes public. So I was just wondering what the discussion was in relation to landing this as a private road as opposed to a public road. And I'm just wondering how that would work.
Did you get that question?
Apologies, I got interrupted.
So it's just a question about whether it's a private road or a public road. Councillor Greening's question is about public access at the moment. Obviously, once it becomes a public road, anyone can trundle up and down it. At the moment, technically, no one can actually trundle up and down it because it's actually private land. So that was the question. I presume it's because it's public money, hence public road.
It'll be legal road and available to the public, that's correct.
So
and it also legalises the 3 or 4 legs down to the estuary, the 4 legs that's currently within the land ownership of the central landowners. So it actually gives access to the estuary as well.
Thanks, Richard.
So my question was, what's the discussion been like in terms of public versus private access, given the issue was raised in this report? Is that unanimous that everyone wants a public road, or is there further discussion?
Yes, reservations have been raised within the community about the fact that being a public road, there will be public access. I think the general feeling about it not being upgraded to a road is going to probably give the feeling that even though it is legal road, that maybe it's a private road. But no, the community has raised concerns about that. But that's no different to people driving up to the end of the Barnett Avenue and walking through. So, those concerns have been raised. And unfortunately, in order to resolve this problem, that issue will still be there, and the community will be like any other community that has a road access to it.
Thanks, Richard. Thanks, Mark. Any further questions before I move to put the resolution? Yeah.
Thank you, through you, Chair. So just a clarification around the hearing panel purpose. So there's the revoking of the reserve status. There's a process around that.
Yes. Well, because of the election coming up, we're probably best not to go through consultation around that. We just have to work out the timing on it. So there's a good chance that we probably won't be able to do the consultation until after the election. There's not much point putting a hearing panel together, going through a consultation process, have an election, and then have people potentially having councillors that are not fully aware of the history of this. So the intention is to come back to you later on when we got the consultation program sorted out. We haven't done anything along those lines because we wanted to make sure that if council chose option 4, for instance, there would be no further progress at all. So we haven't done any more work on that. If option 2 as recommended is going through, well, then we'll be coming back to you with a subsequent report to outline the process that we'll go through the reserve revocation aspect.
And that's the primary purpose of the hearing panel, is around the revoking of the reserve status,
Correct.
as opposed to hearing from the community generally about the notion of what should happen down there.
No, this is more about the reserve revocation, and obviously, if that fails and we can't revoke the reserve and put the road through, well, that basically puts the decision today on hold because we haven't been able to physically get the paper road through. So the decision today is an indication of council they support it, but there's still another process to be gone through before it's finalised.
Just a quick follow-up if I can. So in terms of the 18 people of 30 were supportive, so those that aren't, is there a common concern among those, or there might be a range of concerns?
I'll ask Joe to comment on that. He's been probably more on the interface with the community.
Yeah, through the chair. So the 18 people that did support option 3A, which was to bring the road up to standard, and council purchases it with still a $8,000 per property cost to bring it up to standard. I think that was the biggest hurdle, that was going to cost $8,000 per property from there.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Are there any further questions or comments? Councillor Greening, is your hand back up, or is that just still up? Okay, thank you. Councillor Bryan, do you want to write a reply?
Yes, just briefly, if I may, Mr. Mayor, thank you. That will be really good if we can actually make some progress on this and get some solution that's beneficial to not only the residents, but everyone that's been involved. As long as I've been on this council, which is nigh on 22 or 3 years now, it's been a thorn in the side, and we've tried a number of times to get it solved. I see this as the first step, getting at the road into public ownership, legalised. The reserve reservation I don't see as such an issue, and hopefully it won't be. But at least it'll give all those people on the island that have previously haven't had legal access, some form of legal access rather than access by sea. So that's got to be a beneficial for all of those people, and public access for everyone else in the district to the reserve if they so wish. But I don't see it as becoming a destination or huge amounts of traffic going there. Maybe after some initial publicity, there might be a little surge, but not in the longer term. So I think this will be a good outcome, and fully support and ask you all to support the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bryan. I'll put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? The resolution is carried. Thank you very much. Right. Next item, referral report, Golden Bay Grandstand and Recreational Centre parking. And this is, Joe, welcome back. You get all the good jobs. And Richard Hollier. Cheers.
Thank you, Chair. Happy to take the report as read. We've undertaken the consultation that was sought, and so referral report back to hopefully with a recommendation.
Okay, thank you. So that we've had a bit of discussion about this in the past, one way or another. So I will come to Councillor Hill.
Through you, Chair. Thank you. It's a bit of a roundabout, isn't it? But I'm happy to move the resolution. I just will note that the support from the community board and from the rec park, whatever we're called, management committee, wasn't unanimous. So I just do want to make that point. And I think partly the no votes were related to the principle of the grandstand being funded at all. Not so much that the vote was really about, is it going to come out of this pot or that pot? And that was my interpretation at the time, but do want to make that point. I think that's enough. Thank you.
Happy to move the resolution. Oh, sorry. Thank you, Councillor Hill. Councillor Butler. Oh dear. going to be a long day.
Thank you. Through the Mayor, through the Chair. Yeah, I'm happy to second that. And I did just want to add to the comment from Councillor Hill that the member of the Rec Park Committee who voted against it did want his name to be recorded, and he is the representative from the rugby user group. So, but yeah, happy to second.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? If not, I'll put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Thank you, Richard. Thank you, Joe. Motueka Catchment Management Plan. Noted Councillor Ogilvie. Thank you. Walter, you leading this conversation? Okay, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I take the report largely as read. I just want to clarify that it is a referral report, which is asking the full council to accept the recommendations made by the hearing panel. Furthermore, I do want to take the opportunity to provide some insights into the basis for the recommendations. First of all, the Motueka Catchment Management Plan is developed in accordance with the requirements of our global stormwater discharge consent. So it covers off all the items that we are required to cover off. It's not solely and purely a plan to address flood risk. It also looks at water quality, stream, estuary health, how we can manage stormwater efficiently and cost effectively. And as a whole, the consent requires us to take a holistic approach to stormwater management, taking all these different aspects into account. So that's important to be aware of. Having said that, it's obvious that flooding from stormwater is the most challenging issue in Motueka. And in our investigations to resolve some of that flooding, we look at 3 different types of flooding in a prioritized manner. Priority 1 is to address flooding that's causing a hazard. So think about deep floodwater or floodwaters with high flow velocities that are actually posing a danger to the community. The second priority is to address habitable floor flooding. So this is flooding that gets into people's houses, inundating your living room. That's the second priority. And the third one is basically all other flooding. We refer to that as nuisance flooding. So it's flooding of roads, it's flooding of your garden. In some cases, it's even flooding of a garage because it's not a habitable floor. So it's quite a wide concept, and I appreciate that the word nuisance is sometimes not really reflecting the severity of flooding a garage that's still causing quite a bit of damage to people's property. However, it's quite different from having the floodwaters in your living room. So therefore, it's a third priority. And it's important to understand that this nuisance type flooding is occurring more frequently than the other types of flooding, which is generally caused by more extreme events. So this prioritized way of looking at flooding is set by our stormwater strategy, which was adopted by the council in 2019. And it's applied to all our urban drainage areas in the same way, in a consistent way across the district. So in Motueka, similar to other urban drainage areas, we developed a stormwater model that allows us to predict what flood levels are from different type of events. We have also surveyed floor levels for a large number of buildings in the worst affected areas of town. So these two types of information allow us to quantify the number of buildings that are affected by habitable floor flooding. And in Motueka, this number is estimated at around 200 buildings that are at risk of having their floor flooded. In comparison, the number in Richmond that we estimate is 800 buildings affected by floor flooding. So then we tested a large number of scenarios to find ways to reduce this this type of habitable floor flooding in Motueka, and looking for feasible, cost-effective ways to reduce the number of buildings affected. And I've spoken to you in a number of meetings and workshops about these options, the cost and the benefits. So I won't go into that in more detail now, unless you have specific questions afterwards. Our analysis has been thorough, and it staff's professional view that, considering the local topography in Motueka, climate change, also considering the different sources of flooding, stormwater, the Motueka River, and coastal, that there's no cost-effective solution available to reduce flooding of habitable floors in existing residential areas. Having said that, the future development area in Motueka West does provide good opportunities to reduce flooding of existing residential areas, as well as to cater for growth. So that opportunity is there, and a $5.5 million project is currently being prepared to cater for growth in Motueka West. A further 16 million is programmed in the future for future stages in Motueka West, currently programmed outside the LTP, because we are led by the landowner, who has indicated not planning to develop that land sooner. In response to the submissions and acknowledging the challenges to reduce habitable floor flooding, the hearing panel recommended to deviate from the stormwater strategy in Motueka and address some of the nuisance flooding which is occurring in Motueka, and to invest $300,000 over the next 2 years to address specifically nuisance flooding. I'll probably leave it at that, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Walter. I got Councillor Turley and then Councillor Dowler.
Thank you, through the chair. I'm a little bit concerned that the analysis is, having been thorough, is not really complete at this stage. And I would like to see a revised catchment management plan prepared over the coming 12 months, and that to be brought back to a full council and for the next annual plan in June 2023. I feel that, and it's been said by Walter, that it's the greatest challenge in Motueka. And I just think we've got half a plan here. It's not complete. So, yeah, I have an alternative recommendation that I've sent through to Robin. And basically, just recommending that we prepare a plan that addresses the stormwater needs for Motueka and provides achievable solutions and a higher level of service than this present one will. I'm not sure if we can get a seconder for that, but yeah. And I'd like to call for a division on any voting on this.
Right, thank you, Councillor Turley. Is there a seconder for that resolution? Yeah, yeah, I can't prevent Councillor Turley moving a resolution, but yeah, I have got you on the list. There's a long list of questions. So
Well, it's just like I could potentially second it, but I need some more background information first.
right, so it's been seconded by Councillor Walker. So it's been moved and seconded. So I've got a list of questions of which you are third on the list. Councillor Dowler.
Yeah, well, I know there's concerns in the community that we didn't do the job properly, but I was quite happy sitting on the panel to hear that, well, in my opinion on it was that we were addressing stormwater at the top end of town, at the higher level of town, which would start taking the pressure off the lower end of town, which would help a lot of this flooding that we've got at the present time. There were pros and cons of things, but the outcome did satisfy me that we were moving down a track that was quite acceptable for the amount of money that was going to be spent. We've heard this morning in the public forum that a claim that there's no plan. Well, I feel that there was a plan, but I'm going to ask a question. Because of this dubious Three Waters business that's going on in the background through the government at the present time, is there a plan that the Three Waters people would pick up to be able to continue with the stormwater mitigation in Motueka if the Three Waters, or whenever the Three Waters comes into effect? Because we're told in other areas that we need to have things in place so that if when everything transfers over, there is a program that what we were going to do is going to happen, and the Three Waters, hopefully, we don't get left out like we do in other areas, would be picked up and proceeded with. That's my concern here today.
Is there an answer to Councillor Dowler's question?
Yeah, sorry, I had Richard in my ear at the time. That's all right. I mean, the whole this catchment management plan, the other catchment management plans, all of our other asset management plans, activity management plans, policies, plans, all of it are the starting point for the new entity. They will turn their mind to it in time, and in time they'll start making their own plans. One thing I'm confident of is that they will diligently test the business case for any major expenditure that comes out of it. And they will satisfy themselves whether it's prudent expenditure or not, weighing up all of their various issues, demands, budget constraints, etc. So, yeah, that there is just a transition. I expect largely the first year or two, they'll largely accept what people have put forward. But any large major items in those first years or even later will no doubt be tested thoroughly. And when they do that, they will be coming to the staff who advise you today, because those are the staff that will be advising those entities in the future. And the professional view of that you've heard today will probably be the same professional view that's provided there. That is a difficult place to deal with, that a focus on what we call the Q100 cellular service is very difficult to achieve, and that you're talking for some of the areas we've talked about costs of somewhere between $600,000 to $1.6 million per property to alleviate that flood flow level, which we acknowledge is an issue for those people. So it's a very long answer, sorry, councillor, but all I'm saying is that they won't go in blindly accepting anything that we put forward if they don't think there's a case for it.
Thank you, Councillor Dowler. So I've got Councillor McNamara, Councillor Bryant, Councillor Tufnell, Councillor Walker. Councillor McNamara first.
Thank you. So, yeah, just so I understand sort of the bigger picture here, nobody really cares about Motueka or Richmond for that matter when it's all about Wakefield, but you've said that we have a consistent plan across the district and that Motueka is no exception to that plan. It's all consistency, correct? And we know the mayor loves consistency, so 300,000 to address nuisance flooding is allocated for Motueka currently. That's what you said, yes.
Sorry, through the chair, that's recommended by the panel. Yeah.
Oh,
100,000 of which is in the annual plan for this forthcoming financial year. The rest will need to be included in next year's annual plan.
so that's not in our long-term plan at this stage.
No, it's not in our long-term plan.
Okay, so we have 200 houses affected, 100,000 currently allocated with another 200 recommended. Richmond, we have 800 homes affected. What kind of money have we got allocated to solve their problem?
Through the chair, just to clarify that again, the 100,000 that's been in the annual plan, that's 200,000 that we need to get through the next annual plan is to address nuisance flooding. So it's not to address those 200 houses that are at risk of habitable floor flooding. The catchment management plan identifies that the risk of habitable floor flooding in Motueka is very difficult to solve and very expensive. And there is no cost-effective solution available. It's like Dwayne said before, it's in the order of 600,000 to 1.6 million per property.
So through the mayor, the 800 homes in Richmond were also habitable floor at risk?
Yes, through the mayor, we estimate 800 properties in Richmond being at risk of habitable floor flooding. There is a project in the LTP to address some of that. That is a continuation of the Richmond Central stormwater works, which with Queen Street has been completed. Future stages of that work have currently been, in the current LTP, have been deferred to go through a similar quantifiable assessment as what we've done in Motueka. So this is where the consistency comes back. We are currently completing this week floor level surveys in Richmond. So that will enable us to do the same comparison of how many properties would actually benefit from the works that are currently proposed in the LTP. That needs to go through a business case, and the business case will then tell us whether that's cost effective or not.
And do we have any idea of what kind of impact sea level rise is going to have to these numbers? Like there's 1,000 homes we're talking about here at the moment.
So the 200 and the 800 are based on mean high water springs. So especially in Motueka, if you take into account future sea level rise, depending on what scenario you choose, it'll be we expect that to be more than 200 in the future. So the assessment is taking into account a 100-year event in 100 years' time. So it does take into account future climate change.
Okay, and so we really know very little, as I understand it, about the Three Waters plan for stormwater. Is that fair?
Through the mayor, sorry. The government is pacing water much more quickly than it is wastewater and stormwater. That is true, and its intentions around stormwater and wastewater are less clear. I would say that's a fair point. What I'm confident about, though, and I'm going to have a meeting later on today about it, is that they will be checking all of our asset management plans and programs in the future, regardless of whether they're the pace at which they want to change things in relation to how they're managed is different. It's very clear that they'll be doing a due diligence exercise over all of our plans and proposed expenditure, regardless of whether it's water, stormwater or wastewater.
Right. However, it's reasonably fair to assume that their priorities towards stormwater are going to be fairly low, given their bold aspirations for water management.
Sorry, through the chair, I can't suppose what the new three water entities will prioritise. What is clear is the challenge that they can ignore long term. Climate change and stormwater are intricately linked, and part of the purposes we'll discuss this afternoon for these new three water entities is to address mitigation and adaptation to climate change. So they will have to turn their mind to it.
However, their budget is going to be constrained, even if it's greater than our budget, and they will have immediate health issues with water systems that are failing. I can't see how that won't take a significant priority in their immediate plans. So I think this is probably a one-off opportunity if we were to want to address our stormwater situation, to put forward a plan that is perhaps a little more aggressive than we've currently got. And even when they reconsider it in the light of things to come, it's better that we start up here with a plan to address things, whereas other councils may not be. So if they're going to start, whatever you call it, prioritising work, maybe we'll be nearer the top of the queue than if we don't.
Through the mayor, look, I've got some buddies to help me answer this question, but probably a point I'd make is that our advice to you and to, if we were providing advice, that body would be the same. Our professional view is the same. And that is that it's an extremely challenging area. Ralph just pointed out to me that the biggest flood risk in Motueka is from the river, not from stormwater. And that council, together with funding, has started addressing that. Our professional view won't change. Some of the proposals that have been put forward as alternatives to what's suggested in the catchment management plan simply do not deliver the flooding protection that proponents believe they will deliver. We have our own view. We've had TNT over this. We've compared it to a previous study 20 years ago, which we undertook our study separately from, but compared to against, and it came to the same conclusion broadly. One of the big things you could do, and the things that we talked about before, was a $25 million thereabouts program, possibly more, which would require quite a lot of land acquisition to be involved. I understand more than several properties would be involved in doing so. And you'll be taking their land, possibly their homes, to help deliver on that solution. And I think 18 homes or something like that with properties would be affected. 28 to deliver that. And to undertake that process now without actually compelling argument for doing so, and a good sense of what the return you get, would be prudent in my view. I'm happy to defer to Richard if you want to say anything else.
So, yeah, it was something.
Yeah, just two things about the Water Services Act, water services entities. Number one, that the people that are working on your stormwater system now, most of them are going to be involved in the entity anyway. So that knowledge is going to be transferred. It's not like somebody from Wellington coming and telling us what to do. That's the first thing. The second thing I would say is the legislation is being written to actually stop councils gaming. In other words, putting the WSE into a position where they're carrying liability. And I can say now, if you wanted to put a whole lot of money into Motueka stormwater and they worked out, well, that was wasted money, you're going to carry that cost. We're not going to transfer it across. We've got to be very careful of that as well.
I was going to ask that question specifically. I think, the idea that councils can game the system because everyone will be looking at those options going, gosh, we want to make sure we've got as much in there as possible. And clearly that would be an unsustainable position for the entities to find themselves in. So I presume the legislation and its transitional requirements will try and make sure they address what happens in the next lot of 10-year plan reviews, which will be between now and the final creation of those entities, notwithstanding the issues of national elections, what on earth happens in the middle. So I guess the key point is the resolution effectively is trying to require a different answer from the same people who have just done the catchment management plan. And that seems like an interesting way to go about it. Effectively, that resolution is requiring the same people who have provided the advice and the information in this to go back and come back with a different set of advice. And I think you've heard from Dwayne and Walter that their professional advice, whether it was to us or to a new entity, is their professional advice. So I think, you know, when you're considering how to vote on this resolution, I think you need to consider exactly what you're trying to achieve and what the chances of it achieving it are. Councillor Bryant, Councillor Greening, Councillor Butler, Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to follow on where you just left off commenting, what one would think if we have a proven, robust report, as we have now, that would give us a better chance of getting something done under the new Free Waters entity rather than some plan that's more or less dreamt up on the fly to suit the needs of a few people. I believe we've been through a robust process here. I do have a couple of questions I just want to ask Walter in a minute, but I'll just continue on a bit. We've been through consultation. We've had a hearing panel, heard only 2 submissions, bear in mind, and then deliberations on that. And as the outcome from that process was that we actually asked and got 100,000 towards nuisance stormwater flooding in Motueka through this process in this coming year, which would not have been provided for, and further money to follow if provided for. So I think it's just I have real reservations about the proposed resolution. So I would like to foreshadow, Mr. Mayor, if I could, if that is lost, that I will move the resolutions in the agenda. Now, the question I have, Walter, is just around consultation with iwi. Councillor Ogilvie did allude to that in the public forum. I thought that that was part of the process, so I just would like that clarified.
Yeah, through the chair, correct. We developed a plan together with Ngāti Rāua and Te Atiawa. But prior to that, we approached all 8 iwi and asked how they wished to be involved. They had a choice, different levels of engagement were proposed that they could choose, basically. Ngāti Rāua and Te Atiawa said, no, we want to be part of this. We want to co-develop the plan. So we had several hui with those 2 iwi. The other iwi either indicated that they just wanted to be kept in the loop, or they indicated that they did not have the resources to be involved at all and just wished to get the final plan, basically. So that's how iwi consultation has occurred.
Thank you.
Thanks, Walter. Councillor Greening.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll try not to be too painful this time.
Excellent.
Reminder to switch the mic off when making sidebar comments, I suppose.
Yeah, no, I'll make sure I leave them on when I'm making sidebar comments.
Right. I just want to come back to the public forum comments, which to me, I think staff probably need the opportunity to respond to, and no one's really opened up that door, so I'm going to open it. There were 2 criticisms made. The first one, which I think was quite important to respond to, was the feeling that this plan contradicted the urban strategy from 2019 and the land development manual. I'm hoping staff will be able to respond to that criticism. And also, I think a more serious criticism was pretty much that the consultation was inadequate, given that certain iwi weren't involved, or there's no record of them being involved. So could someone please respond to those?
So I'll get an answer to the first question. The second one was just answered in relation to a question directly from Councillor Bryant about iwi consultation.
Yeah, through the chair, the first question related to the stormwater strategy. The plan is largely in accordance with that strategy. However, where it deviates from the strategy is in the prioritization of flooding. The strategy tells us to prioritize hazardous flooding, habitable floor flooding, and then the third priority, nuisance flooding. However, because the panel acknowledged the difficulty around addressing habitable floor flooding, they felt it appropriate to specifically in Motueka deviate from the stormwater strategy and spend $300,000 to address nuisance flooding in Motueka. That's where we deviate from the strategy.
Thank you, Walter. Councillor Greening.
So in response to the other component, which was the development manual, response on that, and then also again, just a wider comment, although I did reference iwi, the criticism was more generally made that there was inadequate consultation. So,
Dwayne, land development manual and wider consultation.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. The land development manual sets a standard. Its primary purpose is around land development, meaning new growth in the district. Having said that, when council are undertaking its own capital works, it is often the benchmark we go to for making sure that we try to achieve the expected levels of service in the land development manual. But that's assuming there's actually an economic project to undertake. There are plenty of places in the district regarding all infrastructure that exists at the moment, which is a legacy infrastructure that don't meet the modern standards expected the land development manual for new developments. So if philosophically you cannot afford to update all of your infrastructure all at once, even during time, to the land development manual standards, and it's not its primary purpose. In terms of the consultation, I'll probably just remind councillors that at the time we're consulting on the stormwater catchment management plan for Motueka. We're also consulting on the annual plan. We're also consulting on the future development strategy. All of those consultations had to be undertaken on a non-contact basis at the time. So we held webinars to try to engage the public, just like we did with those other activities. It was publicised just like those other consultations were undertaking. We put out newsline articles, we put it in the paper, it was on our website. So, I guess we did what we would normally do for these kinds of activities. The response was just not as engaged as it was for the annual plan or the FDS.
And just one supplementary question coming back to your earlier observation about the deviation from the strategy. What's the hierarchy here? If we agree to this variation, remedy that deviation, or does the overall strategy, can this plan change, or what do you want to call it, deviate from that strategy? I'm just trying to get a hierarchy here of how you could have deviated.
Through the Mayor, essentially you cascade down through those tiers, if you like, those priorities. And what we're saying is it's not cost effective to address your first priority. So you cascade down and you do what you can. In this case, we deal with the flooding aspects that we think we can deal with cost effectively. So in terms of where it deviates from that kind of that strategy, I think Ralph has already addressed that question. Can you deviate from it? Yes, you can. And there's a resolution and the set of resolutions to address specifically with that point.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dwayne. Councillor Greening.
That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Butler, Councillor Walker, Councillor Tufnell.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, my question is, and it may be difficult to answer, but and it may be that the Motueka ward councillors can answer it, but what is the response of the rest of the Motueka community to this decision of the hearing panel? Have you had pushback from from the rest of the community? It's just trying, because I do appreciate that the method of consultation using the story map was perhaps not the best. And my other question was, are you going to use that type of thing again? So my question is, is there buy-in and understanding from the rest of the community, given that the method of consultation for various reasons was perhaps could have been better?
Through the chair, I think I can maybe answer part of Councillor Butler's question, maybe not the part about how the wider community responded to the plan, because we ended up having 8 submissions that we considered, and I don't know what the views of the communities are that didn't submit, basically, but maybe the ward councils are able to comment on that. In terms of the format, the story map format, yes, we have received feedback from a number of people that was not an easy way of taking in the information. That was quite different from the first time we used the story map for Richmond. We had quite a different response back then. The response back then was that it was very engaging, and the format helped people to actually find the information that they were after, rather than having to go through an entire, hard copy document. And so we went off from that feedback from the previous thing. Okay, this is actually a good way to engage the community. We will take on the feedback that we received this time going forward. We think there's still a place for these digital plans. However, there's also still a place for hard copy. So going forward, there will probably be some kind of combination where digital maps are quite useful, where you can zoom in and zoom out, but maybe a report is more suitable to list actions and recommendations and those type of actions, I guess, in the plan.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Walker.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So first of all, I need to state that I wasn't actually on the panel, that I was unwell, off on a medical. So it was only Councillor Dowler from Motueka that was on that panel, because obviously there was a conflict for Councillor Ogilvie and he stood down from there. So the feedback that I've had and not being on the panel is that it's great to have a digital format, but it was actually, they were not able to engage with it. So it wasn't the fact it was digital, it was the way, the software they believed that was used that became a huge barrier, and people gave up trying. So we've got someone who's very savvy on the community board, does a lot, in fact, all of your learning digitally, and she couldn't negotiate it. And if she can't do that, there is no shit show in hell of anyone that's of an older generation, excuse my language, but that's the feedback that I've had, that they couldn't interact with it, so they gave up, which is a real shame, because only 8 people submitting on something as hot a topic as this is for our community is not a good way to move forward. I struggle, and so does quite a few from our community, around the language of it. We do not have a cost-effective solution. So our other wards, so when Rich and Smart starts with their plan, are they going to have that same wording that you couldn't find a cost-effective? Because what's the cost if we don't do something? What's the cost if we put a Band-Aid on something? And my other thing is, I totally hear that the staff have given everything and this is their best understanding, but at what point do we go external to get advice? So if we can't come up with a cost-effective or a solution other than what's been tabled, when do we actually tap out and go, okay, so do we get external support on some of these things?
Okay, so 2 questions, external advice and the issue around cost effectiveness and the way other parts of the district are assessed.
I might just address this. So all the advice that staff have collected and everything else that has gone into this package included our partners at TNT. So we have had external advice through this process. I mentioned before, we also checked our own work and the work of TNT against a previous report by Stantec, which was
NWH at the time.
sorry, yes, Montgomery Watson, NWH at the time. And so there are two external sets of advice to this council that support what we're telling you. In terms of, the cost, to some extent, cost effective is a matter of affordability and subjectivity. But I guess in our view, where the cost of the solution is oftentimes greater than the value of the damage that's being avoided, or indeed the entire property, that's when you start crossing a line, I think, and I think we feel like we're on solid ground saying it doesn't feel like it's a cost-effective solution. Taking $1 million per property, the midpoint in that estimate I gave you, and applying it to the 800 homes in Richmond would result in a cost of $800 million, which is nothing like what's proposed for Richmond at all. So, I guess in that way, we would apply the same kinds of tests and thresholds that we would to the other settlements.
Thank you, Dwayne. Thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor Tufnell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, I'd like to say I won't be supporting the amendment. I think the report that's been presented to us today is a very comprehensive report. It's certainly a lot deeper and gone into areas which I was quite pleased to see. I think following through from this, what we have on the table today is obviously a stage process. There will be further work done at a later date. And we have to take in mind that we do have district issues in this whole business. You mentioned Richmond in particular, but there's topography issues in certain places, and we've also got climate change. So we can't do one big bite at the cherry. We're basically in a situation where we have to nibble. But I think the plan that's been put forward to us today, to me, is very acceptable. Thank you thank you so much for the work you've done. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor Tufnell. Are there any other? Oh, sorry, Councillor Dowlett and then Councillor Hill.
Thank you through you.
That's all right. You carry on.
Did I just go right in there? Oh, you're coughing. I won't be supporting the resolution that's been moved. I do. This is a second round, at least for us, around this report and the plan and the work. And I want to acknowledge the work that's gone in and the professionalism with which you've approached this, and the professional way in which you are communicating to us over and over again around the rationale. And just want to acknowledge that, really, and the work of the panel. So when we're here and we're not on a panel and other people are off doing the work and working through it, I give value to that. And I think the adaptability that's happening here is a good thing. So I'll be supporting, if we get to the foreshadowed, I'll be supporting that. So thank you very much for all the work and the thought. And I think you're very considered in the way that you're going about this, and I'm very appreciative of that.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Councillor Dowler and then Councillor Mackenzie.
Yeah, just a response back to any feedback that I've had. Only a couple of people have rung me, but they just wanted to know where we're going to address their flooding around the High Street area when it gets into the houses around there. And I said that is in the program that we talked about around that, to get some better water movement away from those properties. So basically, it was just generally around that area. They're the ones that seem to hold a great concern. I go back, it seems like 100 years ago now, but when we first did the stock bank evaluation of the town, and a part of that was a stormwater thing as well, because we used to get a lot of water piping underneath stock banks, which become surface water that run through the town. At the present time, we're getting the stock banks refurbished by another way, and hopefully all that piping will stop, which will also help the stormwater, groundwater situation coming into the town, which then we're having to deal with at the present time to get rid of. So every day there's improvements going on, and I'm sorry I can't support the the other motion that's been brought forward this morning. I prepared to second the original motion if it comes to that. So yeah, all I can say is that I haven't had any negativity of possible outcomes that what we've put out there so far, but the questions I've been asked is, have you been able to satisfy that? And I said, hopefully we can. And that's it.
Thank you, Councillor Dowler. Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you very much, through the chair. I thinking about it, it's probably this conversation's one of many that many communities are going to be facing into the future. You just need to listen to the radio this morning about people living in the south coast of Wellington. I guess my question would be, we do have the National Adaptation Plan that has come out from central government, the draft's out for consultation. Now, the approach that we're taking in the staff's view, is there anything in that National Adaptation Plan that would cause us to think otherwise about our approach?
A simple yes or no would be sufficient.
Okay. I don't think so. But may I just add one thing?
Sorry, you nearly got there, Dwayne.
Sorry. No, the thing is, the National Adaptation Plan in relation to low-level lying areas and stormwater and climate change results just promises a bunch of guidance and legislative reform in the future. So actually the answer is there's more to come and we don't know.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Mackenzie. It's been moved and seconded. I'll come to a right reply. I think that we are going to face these conversations, but I guess what this highlights is the $100 million conversations are going to keep coming. We're facing several $100 million conversation. We know that wastewater treatment in Motueka has a price tag that's in that ballpark. We just have to look at this and go, if it's midpoint, if you want to do that work, you're talking $100 million. I know this rewaters thing is controversial and difficult, but it's hard to escape the thought that communities like this, like us, like Motueka, like with small ratepayer bases, can't sustain multiple $100 million conversations one after another in wastewater, water and stormwater. So if there's a genuine desire to address some of these things, and that is the price tag, and we want to try and get it to the point where it's in inverted commas, cost-effective solutions, then the model we're currently using and how we're paying for it is going to struggle to deliver that. That's not suggesting that I think the Three Waters thing is wonderful, or the governance structure is brilliant, or the logic behind it is sound, or even the dollars are actually going to pay out the way they think. But I think what it highlights is that the current model also isn't going to be able to deliver outcomes in a lot of these circumstances. And that's before we factor in the challenges around climate change and sea level rise, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this is difficult. I see this as the first part of what will then subsequently become a discussion around projects and costs and affordability that will probably play out through the next long-term plan, and that will inform the first 3 years of the new entities should they eventuate. And so on that basis, I can't support the resolution that's been moved currently, and will support the resolution that's been put up and foreshadowed by Councillor Bryant, Deputy Mayor Bryant. So with that, I'll come to you, Deputy Mayor Bryant, if you wish to have a right of reply. Oh, sorry, it's not. Councillor Turley, your right of reply.
Okay. Through the chair, this plan fails to provide the details of the Motueka stormwater system, its complex network of pipes and drains, and it is a policy or a plan of minimal management to address occasional nuisance flooding. And it fails to provide a program or any timelines or funding aspects to improve the network over the next 30 years. You say it's a first step in the process, and that's not acknowledged in the actual resolution. The Motueka Catchment Management Plan needs to be given the importance that it deserves, and it should be done once and done right. And And the existing resolution provides just a part plan, whereas the alternative one, number 4, that the revised catchment management plan be prepared over the coming 12 months to be brought to the full council in June 2023, would actually give us time to evaluate this in a better way and provide more direction. So,
thank you, Councillor Turley. I'll now put the resolution so everyone's clear what it is. It's this one up here. Yes, so I've got a division. Yes, I have that done. No, it was seconded by Councillor Walker. You know, we haven't gone all this way down the track without it being seconded. Yeah, it was way back.
Deputy Mayor Bryant.
Against.
Councillor Butler. Councillor Dowler.
Against.
Councillor Greening.
Against.
Councillor Hill. Mayor King.
Yes.
Councillor McKenzie. Councillor Mayling.
Against.
Councillor McNamara.
Against.
Councillor Ogilvie. Oh, sorry, he's not here.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Councillor Tufnell. Councillor Turley.
4.
Councillor Walker.
So the resolution is lost. We have a foreshadowed resolution moved by Councillor Bryant, seconded by Councillor Dowler. Is there a desire? After I put this, I'll ask if there's a desire for further conversation about this resolution. Councillor McNamara.
Just clarification on your comments, Mr. Mayor. So who is going to pay for all this work if all these communities can't afford it?
But I don't know the answer to that question. Yeah. I mean, ultimately, if Three Waters eventuates, the same people are going to be paying for it. There are no more people. And how they prioritise Wellington and Wairarapa and Gisborne and Mortawaka and Richmond, I have no idea. And whether borrowing endless more money is going to make it more affordable or cost effective, I also don't know. So, yeah, I mean, there's as much more I don't know than I know about how that might all plan out. Yeah. We'll put the resolution, we'll break for a cup of tea. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Aye. Do you want it noted? Noted, Councillor Walker and Councillor Turley. Thank you. We'll break for 10 minutes and come back at 5 past-ish. The agenda relates to the Infrastructure Holdings Limited in the name of Mike Drummond. Mike, over to you.
Through Mr. Mayor. I'll take the report as read. This is a referral report from the Joint Shareholders Committee. It has quite a long resolution drafted by Council's legal advisors. Key things that the resolution covers is the restructuring proposals and the initial share issues by Infrastructure Holdings Limited, the holding company or the proposed holding company, and the financing proposals. I'm quite happy to take questions, noting that this resolution also goes before Nelson City Council in approximately 2 weeks for their approval, and it requires both the councils to approve this for it to proceed further.
Thank you, Mike. It's open for questions, comments or moving. Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you very much through the chair. I'm happy to move the resolutions as outlined in the report. I would like to make a couple of comments, if I may. I guess what I would say is that if you're going to be involved in owning a business, then you need to be businesslike. And I think that means looking, amongst other things, at cost minimisation. And so for me, you know, it begs the question, why would you not work in accordance with some established practice and look to save what eventually will be millions of dollars in interest costs? Those savings are eventually going to benefit residents and ratepayers. It'll be a great thing. We've spent thousands, I don't know, maybe hundreds of thousands, I'm not sure, in getting to the point that we have. We've consulted with our community in the long-term plan process, and honestly, I think it would just be irresponsible not to proceed with this at this point. And I particularly would like to thank Mike Drummond for the work that you've put into this. I mean, it has been immense. We've had lots of meetings and workshops through the Joint Shareholders Committee on it, and a lot of questioning. And I completely admire your in-depth knowledge and understanding of what's going on here, Mike. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Mackenzie. Is there a seconder before I go around? Councillor Tufnell, thank you. So I've got Councillor McNamara. Yes, ma'am.
To me, it tends to smack more of a Three Waters kind of a situation with an extra level of governance and not much coming out the other end. The two companies could have worked together with a memorandum of understanding, for example, just recently, and I can't remember whether it was cleaning or fuel, or I can't remember now, proposal. They hadn't combined efforts to negotiate a one contract. So I can't see the benefits being what we're told they're going to be. What I can see is that this business-like entity is borrowing from the LGA, which is not set up as a business-like entity risk. So we've got, for example, port. Our port is competing with Wellington Port over an inland port in Marlborough, which is a high risk, high reward kind of ambition. And I'm not sure that fits within the ratepayers' comfort in terms of liability. So I think these business-like carryings on should be left to a corporate world and insulated from the ratepayer in terms of risk. I do have a question in terms of the interest rates quoted in terms, so their debt doesn't sit on our balance sheet, but their debt is influenced by our Standards and Poor's rating. Is that right?
Mike.
Through Mr. Mayor, the lending rates that the proposed holding company could obtain from the LGFA is impacted by the shareholder council's credit ratings. Having said that, both councils have high credit ratings in the AA range, which is typical of local authorities in New Zealand. Certainly, they have a higher rating than the entity would have. Councillor McNamara looks in the papers, you will have noted that the targeted investment grade is BBB, which is the bottom end of the investment grade, but very good for an infrastructure company in terms of how the port and the airport under the holding company will sit for borrowing.
I just, if I may follow up. So I'm concerned that, like, for example, the Auckland port that went through a debacle over automating that cost them tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions, can't remember the figure, 80 million. So we know business-like decisions don't always go well. We have been given the indication that our Standard & Poor's rating is at risk from the dam, for example. I just wonder, how does that play out if one council has a higher rating than the other shareholder?
Mike?
I would assume that the LGFA will take that into consideration. The borrowing rates from the LGFA are based on their assessment of the borrowing entity. I don't think a movement down one step, for example, the Standard & Poor's ratings would influence the borrowing rates. The other thing to remember is that it's the rate at the time the borrowing is taken. So at the moment we borrow from the LGFA, we get today's rates based on our credit rating. If we were to borrow in 6 months' time, we'd get whatever the rates were in 6 months based on our credit rating at that time. So the borrowing rates move over time, as well as potentially the credit ratings.
Thank you, Mike.
Right, but just to lock in a rate today will have to be refinanced in the future, so it's only a temporary lock.
I think one of the advantages, correct me if I'm wrong, is that you can borrow for a longer period from LGFA than these entities may otherwise be able to through their normal banking arrangements, out to 15 years, I think, Mike.
You're correct, Mr. Mayor. The normal banking arrangements would go out to 5 years. The borrowing through the LGFA can go out to 2037, so approximately 15 years.
Thank you.
One more just from that. So how is it affected, like in terms of the amount this company can borrow, when councils lose their Three Waters income and assets? Obviously, our ability to borrow is going to be reduced. How does that stack up compared to the amount that this company is going to be able to borrow in the future?
Mike?
That's right, Mr. Mayor. In fact, council's in a better financial position in terms of borrowing if the Three Waters proposals go ahead. We lose more debt than what we lose income from Three Waters. Therefore, our ability to service debt actually improves.
So just by way of clarification, because that's my understanding as well, our overall debt to equity ratio is something like below 200. But on our Three Water assets, it's actually closer to 400 if you just take the debt associated to those assets versus our debt across all assets.
That is correct.
Hence, we're actually in a better position because we lose more debt.
We're in a better position to borrow, but we're not in a better position to fund our borrowing, are we? If we lose all our income.
Well, it's just we don't lose the income and the debt. It's just we have more opportunity to borrow debt equity, yet someone still has to pay for that. But it's not a worse position than we are currently. It's just different debt paid for by a different group of ratepayers. Should the council choose to exercise them, and they don't have to, and hopefully they might not, but that will be a future council's decision. Right. Further speakers, Councillor Tufnell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I support us going ahead with this. I mean, the airport and the port company surely will be in a better position individually than they are at the moment. The issue of risk, of course, is interesting to me insofar as that we understand that the airport within say 10, 15 years is really going to have to extend the runway because nobody really quite sure what sort of aircraft will be being used or where we're to. I'm quite sure that will be a very significant amount of money required to make that undertaking. So therefore, I'm inclined that one of the things that we should be possibly looking at is spreading the risk to the councils by actually listing this company, the new company, on the NZX, and that way we spread the risk.
Steps at times, and let's see if this gets before we kind of head off down another track. But thank you, Councillor Tufnell, for that interesting suggestion. I got Councillor Hill and then Councillor Greening.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Thank you, Mike. What are the primary risks for ratepayers? Please.
So the primary risk for ratepayers would be a default on the borrowing, whether from the commercial banks or from the LGFA. The likelihood of the uncalled capital facility or the uncalled capital being called, I consider that remote. The mitigations for those risks is you have 3 boards involved, professional directors, competent boards, capital works programs, and a history of appropriate investment. So these are not high risk entities by and large, and they've had good boards, good history in terms of their borrowing and their investment in the businesses, and that has seen an increase in the returns to shareholders. So in short, the risk is a default under the borrowing arrangements. Neither company has defaulted ever under their arrangements. They're in strong financial positions and they are under strong boards.
Thank you. And what would be the scenario where there would be that call would be made? What's the situation where that's possible?
Through Mr. Mayor, as I said, it's remote. I can't think of a circumstance where it would be. It would require the holding company to default on its borrowings, either from a commercial bank or from the LGFA. There is a high level of oversight by council of the holding company. There are professional boards in place. We would have significant advance notice of such an event. And also it's highly likely, in fact, it's almost certain that the boards would move to take corrective action before there was a call.
Thank you. Just one last one. What's the impact on council's influence and control? What changes in terms of our influence and control with the formation of this?
Through Mr. Mayor, it doesn't really change. The way in which you exercise it is slightly different. It's exercised through the holding company rather than directly on the port and the airport. There are still a letter of expectations goes out, or a statement of expectations goes out, setting the expectations for the holding company, the port and the airport. The statement of intent will be a consolidated statement of intent, but that will have all the performance measures, financial and otherwise, for the holding company and particularly the port and the airport. The reporting back to the joint shareholders, to the joint committee and joint shareholders committee will remain. It will be on a consolidated basis, but both the port and the airport are likely to present in the way in that they do now. So essentially no change from the oversight that you have now, except it's exercised in a slightly indirect way.
Thank you. I'll be supporting the resolutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. I got Councillor Green and Councillor Dowler.
Thank you, through the chair. I haven't been overly enthusiastic with this structure. I like Councillor McNamara. I think a lot of the drivers for this were apparent, and I think quite superficial cost-saving arguments that could have been addressed through an MOU in a much more simpler fashion than the complex arrangements that you're engaging in, which would have involved far less risk. I don't share the enthusiasm from some that there will be this dramatic financial savings. I think what you will see is those savings will evaporate as they take up more debt, and they can take up more debt because the cost of finance enables them to do that through a reduced interest rate. So you're going to see a debt uptake, not a cost saving. And that's already been indicated by the port engaging now on new, which I would consider to be quite risky projects outside of their normal domain against far larger entities with substantially more capital. So I don't agree with the premise savings. It's been mentioned that the airport needs more funding. This proposal never came from the airport. This proposal, in fact, the airport was opposed to it. This came from the port because it wanted to raise more debt. And it saw an ability to access more debt through a different financial arrangement. The airport has a $30 million plus facility, which it's steadily paying off. And by the time it needs to extend the runway, it will have sufficient funds to fund an extension from those facilities, should it go down that track. I think that the structure you're putting in place does create more distance from the two entities that we had a closer arrangement with. I mean, there is a difference, as Mike has acknowledged. There's more distance between us and boards directing NAL and the port. So there is less influence. I still think that this arrangement, when someone looks at it again, it'll be seen more as a tax saving structure, which it really is, which is more than merely incidental. And if that happens, I think your private ruling will be put aside and the tax avoidance provisions will override it. And then it'll be restructured and you'll have no tax savings. I can't support this proposal, I haven't. And a number in the Nelson Airport didn't support it either. I think it's highly risky. I think you're giving license to increased debt, which is obviously the driver for this arrangement from the very start. And you're allowing effectively the port to engage in some activities. You know, it's got access to this capital that it's clearly embarking on doing, which you've only recently heard about. Certainly didn't hear about it before they started asking for this debt. So overall, I think this holding company is overly complex, is unnecessary, provides none of the benefits really that you're looking for. It will be an expansion of capital. Clearly, the port is on an expansion program to mitigate risk that it perceives. Clearly doesn't have as much confidence in the dam economics, which were driving an increase in productivity across the port. So that will probably be lost as well because they'll be servicing more debt. So no, I don't support this proposal on that basis. I'm calling a division and I'm warning that my alternative will be to receive the report and for this council to no longer support establishing a holding company.
Thank you, Councillor Greening. Councillor Dowler.
Yeah, just my take on it from sitting on the Joint Shareholders Committee and working through it is that there is a lot of money that needs to come forward in the not too distant future. The airport needs to build a new emergency shelter for the new fire engine they've got to purchase. That's going to happen in the very near future. The port has to start heading towards zero emissions from all its gear, all the forklifts, etc. So there's lots and lots of money going to be chucked around before they, so anyway, they've decided that a joint funding operation would be more economical. That's where I'm coming from there. But Mike, you just said a minute ago a question about the Joint Shareholders Committee about reporting back. And when I was reading the variation to the Constitution, I see the Joint Shareholder Committee's got a whole heap of red lines through it now. So I assume it's on page 157 of the Constitution on our diligent thing. So I presume that they'll just report straight back to the full councils instead of the Joint Shareholders Committee with that, because it's in a couple of three places that the Joint Shareholders Committee has been redlined.
Mike.
Through Mr. Chair, no, that's incorrect. The specific reference to the Joint Shareholders Committee was removed from the two documents. However, the process and the proposal for reporting structures remains in place. They'll come back through the Joint Committee and the Joint Shareholders Committee. Simply remove the specific references in the shareholders agreement in the Constitution.
And my second question was just in the constitution again, under objectives and relationships on page 159. I see there's possibly been a bit of rewording there. The primary objective of the company is to provide funding vehicles to enable the two companies to operate. I think there was a concern at the time that it didn't say that they couldn't tell the companies what to do. Is that why that rewording has changed? It was just a word change, I think, just to firm it up a bit.
Mike.
In the original document, there wasn't an objective. At the request of a number of councillors, an objective was put in that mirrored the objective within the principles document. There was some wordsmithing of that objective. It's simply there to clearly indicate the role of the holding company is that of a financial conduit, rather than being full oversight for operational integration between the two companies.
Thank you, Councillor Dowler. Just like my 2 cents worth, I think there's been a lot of time and energy and effort invested in this. I do believe in the potential benefits to both companies. As large infrastructure companies, they are inevitably going to have significant debt, and whether that's to address their future capital needs, whether that's to address their investment in climate adaptation and zero emissions technology, there are a whole range of reasons, and that's for the boards of those companies to determine. In the absence of this, they will borrow money anyway up to their capacity to borrow. They will just borrow it from one of the great large Australian banks that we're all so fond of. The debt will still sit with them and the risk will still sit with us as shareholders. Should they default on that debt, we will still have to make a decision at that point to say either we let the great Australian bank take the assets and do what they wish with them, or do the shareholders wish to fill the hole, meet the gap. What this does with the shareholders' advance, it does kind of, I guess, to some extent predetermine that decision, but it's not like that decision wouldn't have to be made in the event of a default in any event, because the companies would still owe somebody else the money. So for me, I think this actually provides greater transparency and clarity over the risks that may exist, as unlikely as they are to ever eventuate than the current situation does. It provides the opportunity for reduced cost of borrowing. And as large infrastructure companies, one of their biggest costs will always be servicing their debt. And so if we can help address that, given that we know that a lot of the other costs that are flying around in the world of infrastructure provision are only going in one direction, which is up, then I think it's something that we absolutely should take advantage of. Utilising the LGFA borrowing, from my understanding, couldn't have been achieved through a memorandum of understanding. So particularly for the port company. And I also understand at this point, and this is a question, Mr. Drummond, that actually the airport company, despite some initial misgivings, are now supportive and have played equal part in the conversations more latterly about this particular proposal that we have in front of us.
Through Mr. Mayor, yes, I can confirm. The airport company have been intimately involved in the working group. They are supportive of the proposal. The early concerns were around operational integration, and obviously the proposal doesn't provide for operational integration. In fact, it's quite clearly set out in the Constitution that it is simply a funding vehicle for the two companies.
Thank you, Mr. Drummond. Sorry, Councillor Walker.
So through you, Mr. Mayor, just a point of clarification, if it goes through and we get a vote for it today, but NCC don't, nothing changes, does it?
Correct. We just revert back to the two companies continuing as they are, borrowing as they do. Yep, nothing changes, correct.
And so it could remain the status quo trading as it is currently if it didn't go through?
Correct.
Thank you.
Correct. Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and so their decision was to predate ours, and then they've had a subsequent number of workshops, I think the latest of which was just on Tuesday. And because of wanting that extra information and time, their decision is now, I think, in 2 weeks' time.
That is correct, Mr. Mayor.
I think for these resolutions, these reflect the recommendations that have already come from the joint committee, and the two councils' approval is the final step in that process. there is still subsequent steps to fully implement it, but the key decisions are going to be made by this resolution and Nelson City Council's one in 2 weeks' time. Mike.
Through me, I can confirm that is correct. There'll still be work that the establishment board will need to do, but these resolutions, and are mirrored for Nelson City, provide for the establishment of the company. They provide for the refinancing and restructure.
Yeah.
Got muddled up with the FDS.
Oh, don't get muddled up with the FDS. Righto. It's been moved and seconded. If there's no further comments, I'll come back to the mover for a right of reply. Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you very much. Yes, I think I would just like to point out around this table that the RACI chart on page 267 of Diligent is actually important, because in that chart it actually identifies where control can be exercised, and that's around the statement of expectations, statement of intent, and also the appointment of directors to the holding company. So they're important things that actually will provide the necessary controls around the holding company. That will be for future work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mackenzie. I'll put the resolution via division. So Robin, could you please call the division?
Councillor Walker.
Against.
Councillor Turley.
Against.
Councillor Tufnell.
For.
Councillor Ogilvie. For. Councillor McNamara.
Against.
Councillor Mackenzie.
For.
Mayor King.
For.
Councillor Hill.
For.
Councillor Greening.
Against.
Councillor Dowler.
For.
Councillor Butler.
For.
Deputy Mayor Bryant.
Or
The resolution is carried.
The resolution is carried.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike, and thank you, as I think was already mentioned, for the enormous amount of hard work that both yourself and staff from Nelson City Council have put into comprehensively providing information, answering the questions, and getting us to this point in the process. So thank you very much. Right, the next item on the agenda, I think, is the remits item. Robin.
I'll take the report as read. I think it's pretty straightforward. So we don't need to have 4 people to attend the Local Government New Zealand Annual General Meeting. It can be just 2. One is a presiding one and one is a backup if the presiding one gets COVID. And there's also the remits to vote on.
Okay, so firstly, I've approached, and it is very much a machinery thing. So councillors Mailing and Mackenzie have undertaken the joyous task of pushing the button in the voting process at the AGM based on what we decide ultimately on the remits contained below. So we can pop those names in there. If anyone else is desperately keen to push the buttons at the AGM, didn't think so. I will now come to the items. People have had an opportunity to look at them, so hopefully this should be relatively quick. So there are 4 of them, Robin? 5? Is there 11 that I can't see? Okay, thank you. Right, so I think we'll take I'm happy to take them all. No, I think I'll take it one at a time. It's probably easier. So in relation to the remit around central government funding for public transport put forward by Porora City Council. Again, I'm looking for movers or seconders either to support or not the resolution. So you're happy to move that we support that resolution? Generally, I'll look for indications. Anyone opposed? So I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Second, review of government transport funding. This is from the New Plymouth District Council. Indication of support or not. Someone happy to move either for or against? Moved Councillor Tufnell, seconded Councillor Turley. Any opposition? All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Illegal street racing. So you wish to move this then, Councillor Walker? All right, moved, Councillor Walker, that we support that resolution. I'll put is there a seconder? Yeah, it's fun, please. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. LGNZ lobby government to implement an infringement notice regime for general bylaws.
May I ask a question
You may.
about this one?
Yes,
So,
yes, I'm happy to take questions.
are there any sort of unintended consequences of this one?
Who would like to answer that question? Leonie.
The ability to be able to infringe through a bylaw actually gives a bit more weight to a bylaw. Quite often they are a bit toothless. We haven't got, so for example, I can give you a little example. Say it was for prostitution, for example. It's always a good example actually, because if you were, if we were wanting to infringe people around that, we couldn't do it. We'd have to take it to the district court. I'm not saying that you'd want to do that, but that's a really good example. If it's a bylaw, then you've only got the heavy hand, so you tend not to do anything. It could be a bylaw, like for a bylaw under the Animal Control Act, you can infringe because there's actually an act that you've got a general bylaw beneath. It does give a bit more weight, but it would still have to go through council. You'd still have to agree that you wanted to infringe. It gives you the ability to infringe, and really, I believe this council is very much around not wanting to infringe people. We want to help people to live within our society and not throwing a stick at them. So it will be still your decision when the bylaws come to you, but it does give you an opportunity to infringe rather than to prosecute at the district court.
So if I may, so does the leadership team support this remit?
I personally support it. I believe, Kim, you are the regulatory manager, and this gives us an ability to be able to actually make them effective rather than at the moment we can only really be hard-handed, and we don't want to be that. Kim, did you want to make a comment?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I'd just like to add to what Leonie has said. Regulation's an art, and it needs many tools and a range of approaches. And if you're pushing everything into a harder edge, it's very difficult sometimes to get the outcomes you want. So being able to broaden that out and look at a different array of tools is, I guess, in so many areas, absolutely proven to be effective. And this is an area that could do with the same type of treatment, in my view.
Thank you, Kim. Councillor Mackenzie, does that assist you with your position? Are you happy to move, support, or reject? Support. Is there a seconder for that support? Second, Councillor Hill. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. And lastly, density and proximity of vaping retailers from Kaipara District Council. Again, views generally speaking. Someone wish to move, support, or reject? Councillor Turley. Support. Seconded, Councillor Hill. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. So that provides direction to those who are going to go and do the voting part of this. So thank you very much for that. Is that all we need to do in relation to that item, Robin?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have servicing tenure for leasehold developments. So Jenny and Marie.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'll take the report as read, just touch on some key points. Council is familiar with this report and issue. There have been 2 workshops so far with council, but at the previous workshop, not all councillors were present and there were differing views around the table. So it was considered prudent to bring a formal report to council on this matter. The purpose of the report isn't to change any current council policy or plans or rules. It's focused more on considering alternative property rights for council in relation to developments. The standard development model is underpinned by the 1974 Local Government Act, and traditionally roads and reserves are vested in council at the time of the subdivision. As you're aware, there's an application currently before council for a small leasehold development where the developer is perfectly happy to still set aside the land for council, but is proposing a perpetual easement rather than fee simple coming across to council. And staff would like the opportunity to trial the process for that. And while staff do have delegated authority to consider alternative arrangements, and there are examples in the report of other alternative arrangements, we would prefer to proceed knowing that council is comfortable that an alternative arrangement is being considered and that the process itself is being trialled. So any decision by council today isn't necessarily a green light that this alternative arrangement or alternative property right will go through, but it will at least allow council staff to look at all the options and consider whether there are sufficient protections and rights for council through an easement that would enable this development to go ahead. And I think in light of the current environment, which is almost 50 years on from the 1974 Act coming in, you've got more growth, you've got more demand for housing, you've got intensification. And so you're going to see more properties put on smaller pieces of land, and that land become particularly valuable to owners, particularly owners who want to remain vested in the land and have long-term horizons and visions for the land, and not necessarily a standard developer who's, in most situations, they're quite happy that the roads and reserves are vested in council to undertake the ongoing operation and maintenance of those. We're happy to take questions on the report.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the introduction. It is open for questions, comments, moving or seconding. Councillor Greening, followed by Councillor McNamara.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction. I did find this report a bit perplexing, but I take it this is the follow-up from what was the Wakatu workshops that you're talking about, the Paul Street development.
Yes, that's correct.
So, so again, I did find the report a bit perplexing because on the one hand, you're saying you want clarification, but at the same time, you're saying, well, we can do this anyway. So I was a bit confused about why we were even bringing it here if you can already do it. But that aside, I am interested in what you contemplate a trial to be, given you are also already doing it. I think it's mentioned in the report. So I'm interested to know exactly how long this trial will be and how you will measure the success of the trial. It must be an extraordinarily long trial if the easement is easement and gross. That's quite a long time. And then one assumes that you won't be engaging in any other similar activities until the trial period's ended. Otherwise, it's not really a trial period, is it? So perhaps you can answer those questions first, and that might clarify me where I'm going. I also have one other question, which is in the resolution itself. It leaves open exactly what the choices are because it says including, which is a completely open expression. So it could be anything. So again, I don't know what direction you're seeking because it seems to be a blank check.
In relation to your first question, the reason that staff have brought this to council is that it is the preference of council, and it's certainly in the regional plan and in the LDM the Land Development Manual, that where possible, the land is vested in council in fee simple. And that is the premise as well of the 1974 Local Government Act, that where possible, roads are vested in council in fee simple. So this is a departure from traditional models, development models, and yeah, staff just wanted to know that council was comfortable that alternative property rights might be considered. So that certainly answers the first question. In relation to your second question around the trial, is the process itself, so going through the steps that we need to go through to look at the covenants that would be included in an easement that would give rights and protections, not just to council, but to infrastructure providers. Also to look at rating impacts, various issues and risks that we would need to consider to ensure that they are sufficient to protect council. A perpetual easement is a good property right. So it's that process itself that would be trialled, because there may be future developments like this that come forward. And this is why we haven't focused on the Poole Street or Wakatu one. This could apply to any developer that comes forward to council. And in terms of your third matter referring to the resolution, I
think it's resolution 2. That says options including.
Leasing license, yeah.
So through the chair, so that it does say including, because what we're trialling is a process. The process is to work out what is the best way to do this, and or to find out if it can be done effectively to give the outcomes that are identified on the front page there. And so it looks like leasing and easements will be the way it will go if it is going to work, but it's in this process of going through working it out, we may find that there are other things that we need to do as well. So we don't want to constrain this inappropriately before we've actually been through the process.
So again, I come back to what direction are you after? Just coming back to the first point, appreciate the constraints that you're operating under, but you acknowledge that you already have delegation to do this. So you're saying the delegation isn't properly authorised, or you can't do this?
We're not saying that the delegation isn't there. There are, from the, I think it's a consent planner upwards, has the ability to set conditions for resource consent applications. But it is a departure from standard practice and standard developments that we felt was worth drawing to the attention of council, having that discussion around the table. And it's looking towards the future and the different types of development models that we're going to see coming forward. These matters were all addressed in both workshops and in the report.
Yeah, I read that.
Okay, thank you.
Just following up on the second one, what period of time are you proposing for this trial? I didn't hear the period of time you're conducting this trial over.
The trial's not about a period of time, it's about a process. So what we want to do is go through a process to see that we can achieve the necessary outcomes for council, infrastructure providers and the community generally. So it's not about the length of time, it's about a process to see that we can get a process that will work well, that we could use again if it was appropriate.
So when will you know that the process has been successful or not successful is what I'm driving at? In a year's time, in a couple of months' time?
We'll be able to assess that based on what legal arrangements we can put in place. That may take a few months.
Can I suggest we add a 5 to the resolution, which says reports back on the process at the point in time that it's concluded, and advise council on the success or otherwise, or lessons learned, or wherever we are. I think it is a good point from Councillor Greening that clearly the point of trialling the process is to assess whether it's been successful. Did the process work? Is there any further things we need to change? And so having it clarified in the resolution would be useful, I think.
Just on the final point, in the workshop documents, you were trying to, I think, allude to where we wanted to grow. Was there a favoritism towards leasing options or easement options, and I wasn't seeing that in this resolution. So are you not now seeking clarity of which way council wants to go? You just want to do whatever you want to do and tell us about it later. Is that what you're suggesting?
Correct. We're not seeking any guidance on in relation to easements or leases.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Greening. Councillor McMahon.
Yes, so on the terms of the trial, once this process for this particular request has been concluded, assuming we enter into an arrangement, you would consider that a success, and then any developer could apply for a similar arrangement.
Yes, there's definitely the potential for that. And the report touches on that, you know, for a smaller scale leasehold development like this, the risks are less for council, and for a larger development, there would be other risks. So every application would need to be considered, as is always the case anyway, on a case by case basis.
Is the lease transferable under our proposed pilot scheme?
Well, I think with Three Waters, it would be prudent to factor in some sort of ability to transfer those rights.
I was thinking the landowner's lease as opposed to council, so that is a good point also.
So you mean the lease that's been given to the leasehold occupants? Would there be the rights to assign? That's a matter between the landowner and the lessee, so I couldn't comment on that. But it is fairly standard to have assignation rights, but subject to the agreement of both parties.
So in the workshops, it was kind of indicated that it would be unlikely that there would be much of an uptake from the general developing community because they don't have the same view about holding on to land. They like to sell it as soon as they can. So hence my question around, can they develop under this model and then sell the whole entity onto a property owner?
Under what's been proposed to us by this developer, they've been very clear to say that if they chose to sell the area of land, then the area that the council wants use of would vest in the council in the normal way.
So to put it another way, it's only for as long as it remains leasehold that this, and it should anyone, this developer or anyone else, then at some future date choose to freehold their development, our lease arrangement would convert to a vesting situation.
Correct.
However, by this time, the land has been developed. Now, I struggle to see an advantage to the applicant, given that they were giving up their rights to the land in perpetuity of still owning the land. The only right initially I could come up with was that 50, 100 years down the road, there could be a claim against council for not paying appropriate market rental for the land that we occupy. That still sits out there. The other thing that I've since come up with, and why I think that every standard developer is going to jump all over this, and that is when they are developing their land, if they still own this piece of land, when it comes to the site coverage rule, their 20% of land is now the piece vested into council's control, so they can actually cover 100% of their piece, whereas their neighbour who doesn't have this arrangement is gifted that 20%, and now they can only build over 80% of the remaining property. So in effect, they gain an extra bedroom. And then when it's sold later, oh, well, it's too bad, it's already built. So they're not likely to have to remove that bedroom to revert back to the site coverage rule.
Yeah, so the question is, I think, does this arrangement either positively or adversely affect things such as boundary setbacks, site coverage rules, because the underlying ownership of both bits of land remains the same, despite the lease or easement arrangement, which may have been entered into in favour of council and other infrastructure providers?
Through the chair, I'll defer to planning to comment on that. Thank you, Annie.
Hi, thanks through the chair. It won't affect, or it won't have to affect, be affected by those at all, because as part of the subdivision consent, which would enable this, we are free to restrict that further. So as far as boundary setbacks go, it would still effectively be a road. So it would still have to meet the setback to that. Site coverage, it doesn't take into account rights of way. So a road is effectively, it would be effectively served the same way. So it wouldn't have any benefit in that respect. And if there was any loopholes in that, that's something we'd work through at the time of subdivision, and we can consent notice those. So that wouldn't, there'd be no extra benefit there.
Okay, thank you. So the answer is no, it doesn't provide that loophole / benefit.
Interesting. So we're back to little to no benefit. So really, to me, it's just, was it in the 80s where we went and down a cross leasing thing to get more coverage that turned it into a debacle? I cannot see a benefit in going down this road, given that they have given up their rights in perpetuity over that land and still forcing this leasing paperwork.
Thank you, Councillor McNamara. Are there any, Councillor Ogilvie?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Mayor. I'm strongly opposing this resolution. I think we'll be giving direction to council staff that we retain, as much as we possibly can, control of this area. It's basically a footpath or a road reserve or something like that, or actually the road itself in the proposal. I know there is delegation available, but that delegation is used really where there are remarkable or most unusual circumstances. This is actually making something which is unusual almost standard. The trial we're talking about is a property in Poole Street, Motueka. If it's successful, or if it's allowed, rather than successful is the wrong word, if it's allowed, then it will go right through to the various, I mean, the 200 sections in Motueka West, which is owned by Wakatu. But I think, as Councillor McNamara has indicated, other developers will start to take advantage of this situation. And it becomes, for council, in terms of the control of a footpath or control of the road or control of other things, exceptionally messy. And it's that messiness that worries me quite a lot, actually. You know, as I say, it's unusual and remarkable at this stage to do that delegation. We are making it regular, normal, standard, acceptable. And I think really that's the bottom line in this debate today. Thanks, Mr. Chief.
Thank you, Councillor Ogilvie. Any further comment? Councillor Dowler.
Yeah, just in item 3, the definition of a small leasehold development, please. One section or 100 or 200.
The development in question is looking at 4 leasehold properties on it. Yeah, on Poole Street, yeah. And just coming back to the previous comments, yeah, staff can't express any views on the values or benefits that the developer may have in relation to retaining the land. It's not seen as a commodity. They've got their own reasons for retaining the land. But if you put yourself, yourself in the shoes of a landowner, in the pressure on land at the moment, it's not unreasonable. But I also hand over to Dwayne to make a comment about the amount of times that council staff exercise their delegated authority.
through the Mayor, and I'm answering in my capacity of my previous role as the activity planning manager, where development engineering was my team's responsibility. Just so you know why I'm answering on behalf of these guys. So in that role, we had ability under the Land Development Manual, under the Engineering Services Manager's authority to depart from the standards in the Land Development Manual. And we did exercise those. It was exercised in regard to the uniqueness of the situation, to the practicalities of meeting what was our standard solution in the LDM in those times. And then in many ways, the TEP or the TRMP is the same as a starting point, and through the consent process, you tease out all the nooks and crannies and the things that you might need to step away from, and it's contemplated as standard in that plan. And this is actually a parallel here. So yes, it is not unusual for the council to depart from the LDM. That was always done with due consideration. We have done it once before previously in relation to leasing a road in Motueka. And I probably, so not unusual at all. Probably I just need to bring out one point to your attention. It's not a good reason for which way you decide on this, but Wakatu have indicated that this is an important principle for them. They have unique circumstances that apply to them, and the reason they want to retain the land, which I would have to say with my experience as developers would not be widely applicable. Most developers don't have an emotional connection with the land. They buy, they develop, they dispose. They don't want a long-term liability or a hassle associated with the land. The other thing I guess I probably need to point out to you is that, we're in a partnership arrangement with Wakatu under the Infrastructure Acceleration Fund for Motueka West. And, they have expressed an interest in following a similar pattern of development and land tenure for that. And I guess they will turn their mind to whether they want to progress with that. Depending on today's discussion. Probably shouldn't sway you. You should make it on other good basis, but I just needed to let you know that so you have a fully informed decision.
Okay, thank you, Dwayne. Any further questions or comments? Oh, Celia.
I'm actually happy to move this. And has it been moved yet? No, I'm happy to move it. I see that the resolutions are confirms, the wording is confirms, which is that's something that is already existing. The delegated rights are already there. It is the type of process that council already has, that staff already have, are able to progress and have done in other situations. So I think that that council needs to be open and with all, with a mind to protect itself, of course, and I feel the protections have been put in there in the report, but I think council needs to be open to different ways of doing things. So on that basis, I move this.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Are you happy to include a 5 which says report back on the process post its conclusion?
Yes.
Either whether it's successful or not, but just report back post the conclusion of the process. Thank you. Is there a seconder for the resolution? Seconded, Councillor McKenzie, Councillor Turley, and then Councillor Greening.
I may have missed this, but do maintenance and repair costs fall on the landowner or on the council in this situation?
They would fall on council. That would be part of the agreement with the developer. Yeah, but that's like any other situation where the land invests in council. The only difference here really is whether or not council owns the land. Everything else would be the same as if it did own the land. And we do have other examples with retirement villages and so on, where there are private roads and council infrastructure in those developments.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Greening.
So I just want to get clarity here. So the status quo at the moment is that we can do this already and have been under existing delegations. So is that right?
That's correct. Where there are certain circumstances or unique circumstances, it's not the standard model.
Right. So at the moment, you can effectively do this under your current delegation and we don't need to confirm what is already the status quo.
That's correct.
Okay, so this is the perplexing part I find of this report.
Well, it's not perplexing at all. It's been adequately explained by the council staff several times in this conversation that they, despite the fact the delegation exists, they would like our confirmation about how they go about exercising it. So should we pass this resolution, that will give them the comfort that the council collectively supports the exercise of the delegation. If this is not passed, I would expect to see a subsequent report which probably asks whether we want to withdraw the delegation, because clearly we wouldn't have supported its exercise. So it's been adequately explained why this is in front of us. We just have to make our decision, and that will either confirm the use of the delegation by staff or, I guess, open up the question as to whether the delegation should continue to exist.
Well, if they are seeking greater clarification, which is what you're alluding to, then I would have thought that there would be more precision in the second point, because clearly it's not contemplated that this is a broad subdivision development right, but one that is tied to land or Maori land or land that is not necessarily willing to probably let go of full ownership. So I just wonder whether the precision in the resolution could be provided a little bit more, because I think there is concern that this will go widely if it's broadly defined as subdivision developments. And really what we're saying is there are unique pieces of land which are fully, shall we say, easement orientated, where title is not given, and they want also the land within those developments to also be consistent with the broad land of the development. So maybe we should be a bit more precise and suggest that this is in relation to Maori land.
Well, it's very specifically not specific to any particular land ownership. I think that's the key point in the resolution, is that it is absolutely not specific to one particular landowner. I think the degree of specificity is contained in 3, which is small leasehold developments. And my assumption, and I stand to be corrected, is that if we go through this process and we get a report back on its success or otherwise, and should a large leasehold development or a non-leasehold development want the same thing, we will be back having a subsequent conversation, because that wouldn't necessarily have been covered by this resolution.
I merely respond to the examples provided today to justify it, which is predominantly Maori land.
Thank you, Councillor Greening. Councillor Ogilvie. Thank you. Is there any further comment? Just before I come back to the mover for a right of reply, look, I fully support this. I think looking forward, there are a whole range of people who may be interested, whether they're churches, whether they're people like Habitat for Humanity, housing trusts, where leasehold, long-term ownership of land actually might be something that works well for them. Rather than asking ourselves, what's the advantage to the person applying, I think what we should be asking is, what's the disadvantage to us? And again, from my understanding of everything we've discussed, the explanation that actually isn't a disadvantage. We have every right, every ability to control this land as we would have if it was freehold. So in the circumstances where we want land for reserve, for road, for whatever purpose it might be, it doesn't appear to me that there's a disadvantage to council of providing this option. We're always talking about flexibility, adaptability, but giving staff the opportunity to exercise delegation, to use their initiative, to enable things to happen without the tortuous processes which we're so often pointed at for being responsible for. So this just seems to be another option that in some circumstances might enable something to happen. There doesn't appear to be a distinct disadvantage or any disadvantage to us. And frankly, I'm not too fussed about what the advantage or disadvantage is to the person applying for it, because that's their choice. So I support the resolution that's been put forward.
Volume's gone.
First time I spoke in the thing, it was just my view, so you don't have to respond. You certainly have your view. You've made it clear. So. Man, if you wish to make a short comment, then feel free.
Well, yes. I speak in terms of benefit because there's a cost to it. So I'm doing a cost-benefit analysis when I weigh my decision. That's all I'm saying.
That's absolutely fine. Thank you very much. Right. Would the mover like a right of reply? Thank you. I will put the resolution with the inclusion of 5. All those in favour?
Can I call a division?
You may. It seems to be the order of the day, so we might as well just start from that basis, and maybe if anyone wants to suggest we just do it the normal way, we'll run that.
We might have forgot.
Oh yeah, that's the way you read out our names. It's like that English weather forecast thing, isn't it? So that's what it is, Robin.
Councillor McNamara.
Against.
Councillor Ogilvie. Councillor Tufnell. Councillor Turley.
Against.
Councillor Walker. Councillor Mackenzie. Mayor King.
For.
Councillor Hill. Councillor Greening.
Against.
Councillor Dowler. Councillor Butler. Deputy Mayor Bryant.
For.
Carried.
The resolution is carried.
Thank you. The resolution is carried. Right. Where are we time-wise? 10 minutes. Right. So we'll go through till past. So if we can get through these next 3 items, and then maybe we can have a discussion whether to break for lunch or do the in-committee item and then break. So the next one is the machinery resolutions. Someone like to move? Move, Councillor Bryant. Seconded, Councillor McNamara. Thank you very much. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Chief Executive's report, Leonie.
Kia ora. I'll take the report as read, but I do want to make a couple of comments. Look, we've had a really busy time at council, and you councillors yourselves will know that. Staff have been working incredibly hard on a multiple of complex pieces of work. And I just want to talk a little bit about some of the pressures that they are also feeling as well, with a lot of staff all sick. We had 9 out of their IT team in 1 week. That came down with different types of illnesses. So it's not just COVID, it's other things. I just want to just thank those staff. And there's people who are backfilling other people. And there's a lot of tension, obviously, in the workplace. So we're doing our best to relieve that. And people have responded really well. We have had some note around the customer services area that we have been a bit slower getting to calls, but that's been due to sickness. So I just wanted you to recognise that if you hear that in the community, and I commend the staff on doing that. And also, again, we farewell Dennis, and we will shortly farewell Susan next week. And I do want to, I have put it in my report, but I do want to thank Susan for her years here, that she has actually done this tremendous amount of work in our policy area, in our strategy, in our customer services, her libraries. She has been the eyes across all our reports, making sure that they were fit for purpose, were legislatively correct. And she has been incredibly diligent in that aspect, and we're going to miss her. So I just want to thank Susan. You've been absolutely wonderful, and it's been great to get to know you. And so Susan leaves us next Friday for travels, and she's got some exciting travel plans ahead of her. The rest of the report is pretty light today. I welcome any comments. There is one resolution other than receiving the report, and that's to do with the submission around the draft national adaptation plan that has gone through. Thank you.
Thank you, Leonie. Open for questions, comments, moving or seconding. Councillor McNamara, then Councillor Dowler.
Yeah, couple of questions. One is that the staff churn seems to be excessively high at the moment. Is that correct?
It's not as high as some. We are running at about 14%. We typically around 8 or 9, so it is higher, absolutely. There is a little bit of shoulder tapping going on across different agencies, and all councils and actually a lot of our government agencies are also managing that. But we've also been attracting some very good staff as well into council.
least that's good to hear. 2 minor injuries within the Richmond office, one resulting in damage to a member of the public's car. Sounded a bit odd. I wondered why there was a car in the Richmond office, to be fair.
I'm not across that, but we did have a couple of minor. One person slipped on some water, and another one was to do with a sliding door. Yeah, but I don't know about the car. Sorry.
So that it's in your report. But anyway.
I can find that out for you if you like.
And in the report, we're going to approve your submission. The $185 million for the dam is out of date and it will not be commissioned this year, I believe.
Yes, this report was just before that news came to us. It was last week we only received that information. Sorry. We only received that information after this report had already been put on the agenda.
So has it been submitted or will we be modifying the report?
You're talking about the submission, yeah. I know I've got no staff here to report on that.
We can go back to
the submission has been submitted through you already, and it was submitted in 3rd of June, so it was quite some time ago and well before that information came out.
Yeah. So is your question whether we will go back and get that modified?
Retrospectively approved, so I'm kind of wondering the point of it now, but anyway, thank you.
It's something that we generally do.
Thank you, Councillor McNamara, Councillor Dowell, and then Councillor Hill.
It's just really a quick comment on our favourite word, COVID. I had a very good friend, shift to Ashburton, about a year ago. About 5 months ago, he was stood down from his work 4 hours a day because they decided he was having angina attacks and was probably going to have to have a major heart operation. I got a text from him last night just to say, I've just been medicated off work for the next 3 months. Now they think I have a thing called a long COVID. Yes, it does exist. Quite a few people are coming out of the woodwork with it. It's basically just extreme fatigue and there is no cure for it yet. We'll keep you posted. So he will have 5 months on light duties, 4 hours a day, and now he's 3 months off until they work out what they can do with him, just to let you know that it's around.
That's the thing. Councillor Hill and Councillor Bryant.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a process matter. So if we didn't approve the submission retrospectively, what's the deal there? Do we ring them up and say send it back?
We'd have to withdraw it.
Councillor Bryant.
Thank you, Mayor Tim. So thank you for the report, CEO Leone. Just one question around that, the recruiting staff we're recruiting for firstly. Some of those have been on the list a little while now. Is that because we're not having any applicants? No luck with the applicants that are applying, or perhaps you could enlighten us?
It's a bit of a mix. Yes, so we're always looking for consent planners. It's permanently on the list. In fact, I think we've just always got an ad out for consent planners. Yeah, like the rest of the country. Yes, it's a mix of whether we're getting the right applicants. Of course, trying to attract them to the area as well. There's some complexities in that with the current climate. But we actually have been really successful in attracting some really, really good people. So it's a problem everywhere, and as you'll see in all the news that there's staff shortages across the country, and we're no different to anyone else.
And finally, I'd just like to join you in acknowledging the work that Susan's done across the organisation in the time she's been here. It's been a wonderful contribution and hugely respected by people around this table. And I know she's very passionate with the way she leads her staff, and the effort she puts into her works well beyond the call of duty, working well into the night quite often. So it's a huge contribution, and she will be sorely missed. And the other thing I'd just comment, and I'll probably say this at the farewell as well, so that one thing I have learned going to provincial and rural and provincial is that Susan's held in high regard all around the country. So it's a wonderful contribution. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ryan. It hasn't been moved. Move.
I'm happy to move.
Councillor Bryant, Councillor Hill.
I'm happy to second.
Thank you. I'll put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Oh, sorry, sorry, my bad. Councillor Greening. Oh, geez, that was effective. How did I do that? The next item is the Mayor's activity report. I'll take it as read. And reiterate the comments already been made. Susan's obviously learned from Dennis's departure methodology, and the fact that Dennis has just about been in there more often than he was before he retired as part of reporting back to the WCO process. And so Susan's taken the approach of leaving the building and leaving the country in quick succession. So she can't be dragged back in to provide the advice. And just following up on what Councillor Bryant said, alongside Susan's contribution to this organisation over a significant period of time, her previous contribution to local government and her previous roles, and the respect and with which you're held right across the local government sector, I think is something we've benefited from significantly over your time here. I wish you all the best with your future travels and whatever it is that you choose to do next. And I have no doubt you will continue to make contributions to communities wherever you are and whatever you happen to be doing. So thanks very much, Susan. Really appreciate it. Right, I'll move the receipt of my report. Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you. I'm happy to second that. Just with regards to paragraph 3.5, if I may, Mr. Mayor, it's not like you to get frustrated in a meeting, but I see that you say that you did. And so is there anything else that you can expand on with regards to that?
I was so frustrated I didn't actually complete it, which is very unusual. Normally I at least stay and be frustrated and don't just leave because of my frustration. But yeah, like it was incredibly challenging. I'm not sure how much progress has been made subsequently. But what I think we anticipated was a change in approach from Kānoa around the funding and the opportunities, given that they requested us to come back to them. What I took from it is actually they hadn't really changed to any significant degree about the access to funding, the way it might be provided. And I think everyone in the meeting was frustrated. I probably just displayed it slightly more openly than perhaps some others did. So yeah, it was disappointing. I'm not sure if there is an update in terms of anything that's happened subsequent. Mike?
Through Mr. Mayor, no, there's been no further update available on the success or otherwise of our request for funding.
Yeah, and the meeting was set up and effectively facilitated via the NRDA and Fiona Wilson. So I think there's a degree of frustration that is shared across various entities who attended that meeting. But at the end of the day, we have to continue trying to work with Kānoa across a whole range of things. Not this is one project, but actually MB and Kānoa have a role across a whole lot of things we're dealing with. So clearly I have to refrain from being frustrated too much. Otherwise they might not talk to us at all. Welcome back, Councillor Greening. I'll come to you after Councillor Hill.
Through you, Mayor. So just to follow up, after that meeting actually was incredibly frustrating and a complete waste of time, actually, I thought. But we had a letter from an email from Fiona after that, and oh, we're in public. No, just to say, I think that they're following up in the other avenue around Kānoa being a vehicle for a broader access to other options in terms of government agencies. So it was a very good email back from Fiona, who was also pretty disappointed in having been invited to, sound like the door had been opened a little bit and it was firmly shut. So I think that would be how I'm thinking about there was some progress in terms of the where to next, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Hill. Councillor Greening. He's gone again. No, he's not. There he is. Councillor Greening.
Apologies, my connection is quite unstable.
Oh,
I had a question in relation to the CEO's report, but I assume that that's now passed.
yes.
Do I have liberty to ask a question?
You do.
Fantastic. Just referring to 7.4 and the structural review, I was wondering if you could expand on exactly what's involved there, what the cost is. Is that going to be drawing down from the 2 million that was set aside for building investigations? How is all this going to be funded?
I will actually refer to Richard. He has been really close to this, but that's a good question. Richard?
In reviewing the structural reports from 2 years ago, we identified a couple of areas that had been addressed 18 months ago with staff and the like. I've asked for it to be reviewed again. It's largely to do with the floors in zones 3 and 4. And so that review is being done, and yes, it is going to be funded out of the 2 million. What I'm considering, there's a low risk of it happening, but we as a leadership team think we need to revisit it because we want to even go to a lower risk in terms of risks to staff to make sure that, we're not quite watertight, but closer to watertight than we are now. So we're just getting that reviewed by the engineers, the structural engineers, just to make sure that their original assessments, which was peer reviewed, is still valid. And if there's any minor works that can be done to actually lower the risk even further for that. So that's all that work's related to.
Thank you, Richard.
So what's the cost of this?
We don't know yet. The engineer's coming back to us on that, and obviously, depending on what the cost is, will determine whether we go ahead and do the work or not, bearing in mind that whatever we do, potentially within the next 6 years, we won't be in this building, based on the decision that council made 18 months ago. So we are conscious of not spending money that's going to be a sunk investment.
Thank you, Richard. Right, Councillor Turley.
Just a clarification, are all the buildings on this site below the earthquake risk standard, or just most of them or some of them?
Well, if you recall back in the reports, all the buildings are divided into 5 zones, and 3 of the zones are less than 34%, in other words, risks prone. This building's been strengthened, as you see, so it's between 34 and 64, so it's just risk, not risk prone. So, but the other 3 are still less than 34%. But we've been reassured by the engineers that if we do get the design earthquake, the buildings will be severely damaged, but are not likely to collapse. So people will be able to get out, but we won't be able to utilise the building. So that's the situation there. And I think what I've asked for is to make sure that with those floors, that any risk of collapse is actually reduced even further, because the last thing we want, particularly with staff on the 3rd floor or even on the 2nd floor below them, is to have that risk. So we want to take from low down to very low if we can, and see what the cost is of doing that.
Leonie.
And just to expand on what Richard is saying, firstly, our health and safety risk appetite is very low. This is why it is good to always continually revisit our risks, and this is one of them. But also we're doing wider things like looking at making sure all our access ways out of the building are going to be clear. There's nothing going to collapse over the people actually getting out after the event. And also we're going to be doing earthquake drills. Obviously coming from Christchurch and being through several, thousands of earthquakes, I think it's really important that our staff are really aware of how to get out of the building and what to do. We don't want people running for the doors. It's not the right thing to do. So it's broader than this as well. So this was just a piece of the work we're going to be doing to make sure that we are as resilient as possible.
Thank you, Leonie. Thank you, Richard. Right, back to my report, which I've moved. Has it been seconded? The receipt thereof, seconded somebody or other. Christine did. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. So I think at this point we will break, and because we have a workshop subsequent to the final item on the council agenda, so we will be back here at say 1:10. Yeah, and we will go into confidential at that point in relation to the item around strategic property purchase. Thank you. We'll get back underway. Someone move that we go into committee, the rationale being disclosure of information under section 7, carry on without prejudice negotiations, including commercial and industrial negotiations. Move Councillor Ogilvie, seconded Councillor Hill. All those in favour, please say aye. Against? Carried. Mike, Richard?